colleagues. But we go to point 19 on the control and the acquisition and possession of weapons. Presentation by the Commission and our first exchange of views. Today, DG Growth and DG Home will present us with a new Commission proposal on amending the Directive 91/477/EEC on control of the acquisition and possession of weapons. Afterwards, the Rapporteur, Ms. Valero, will have the floor to start a first exchange of views. So I want to ask Mr. Delso if he will take the floor now, after which Ms. Valero will have the floor. So, Mr. Delso, if you could please take the floor to begin. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair.
You were disguised by people leaving.
No, I know. So many people are moving around.
I know.
mean, that's,
Thank you. Please take the floor.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be here, even if the topic itself is a difficult one and a very important one. I don't need to recall, of course, the tragic events of last year, and which justifies the Commission proposal. I know that we are running late, so I will try to be as short as possible and to go to the main points and the main aspects of our proposal. First of all, I would like to clarify one thing. Of course, we know that many weapons are being used for very good purposes, for hunting or for sport reasons. We do not want to tackle this kind of problems. Simply, we want to tackle a very specific situation, but which is a very important one, which is the use of firearms for, in the terrorism or other measures like this. So, what we really want to do in our proposal is to try to strike a balance between the legal use of weapons, but also safeguarding EU security, because we consider this is extremely important. So what are we proposing today, subject to the Parliament and the Council review? We are proposing a legislation, draft legislation, which has been based on studies. Actually, we have conducted 3 studies, and those studies have also talked and discussed with many stakeholders. So it's not the result of something that we have invented at the last minute. It's based on a long preparation. What do we propose? First element, and there will be 5 main modifications. First element, the category of firearms. What do we propose in this respect? We do not prohibit all semi-automatic firearms, but we propose to prohibit 2 categories of semi-automatic firearms that we consider to be potentially dangerous. First category are those automatic firearms which have been transformed into semi-automatic firearms. And where do we see the danger? That those firearms which have been transformed in semi-automatic firearms could be retransformed again in automatic firearms. So that's the first element. Second element in this respect is the semi-automatic firearms for civilian use, but which resemble weapons with automatic mechanism. And the example we quote is a semi-automatic Kalashnikov. We believe this kind of weapons, and again, we are open to discuss maybe what do we mean by such a term, resemble automatic weapons, but we believe this kind of weapons are potentially dangerous and we need to look at them. Now, we have also, under this question of categories of firearms, we are also looking at alarms and signal weapons, which under existing rules can be acquired without any formalities. But those type of weapons can be transformed relatively easily into real firearms. So what we propose that this type of weapons, of instruments, would be subject to a simple declaration. Second element of our proposal, deactivated firearms. We have already, as a Commission, adopted a regulation on deactivation. This regulation has been adopted on the 18th of November, and where we have introduced stricter criteria for limiting the risk of reactivation. But we cannot totally exclude the risk of reactivation. So, what we propose, therefore, is that to prohibit the acquisition of the most dangerous firearms even after deactivation. This concerns the so-called A category, To give you a very concrete example, an automatic Kalashnikov, which has been deactivated, according to our proposal, would remain still subject to this prohibition of acquisition. And for the other categories, deactivated firearms could be acquired by private persons, but we still believe that a declaration would be needed so we can have a tracking of those firearms, deactivated firearms. Third element of our proposals, Internet. I don't know if probably you have never tried it, but if you really want to purchase on Internet weapons or firearms, it's really easy. I'm not encouraging you to do it, but that's something which is very easy. So we want to try to limit the acquisition of firearms on Internet for private persons only by means of dealers and brokers. We don't want to prohibit it, so it will still be possible to buy firearms on Internet, but we want private persons to do it through dealers and brokers. Fourth element of our proposal, brokers and collectors. So far, brokers and collectors are not subject to the existing directive, contrary to the dealers that I've just mentioned. So what we propose is, in our text, that collectors, they will have to request an authorization under the same condition as any other private person when they want to purchase a weapon, and when it's possible, of course, to purchase such a weapon. Final element of our proposal, exchange of information between member states. We have seen that there is not enough exchange of information between the different member states, and so we want to encourage and force the member states to put into place a system of exchange of information. We will be looking at what exists and we will see how we can improve such a system of information. In conclusion, I would say we know this is a sensitive topic because we know that many people in Europe are using firearms for perfectly lawful purposes, and we don't want to prevent this, but we cannot also ignore the risk for security, and we hope that with our proposal we have struck a good balance between those two sometimes conflicting objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I mean, for those who have been looking at this proposal, you'll notice that the committee responsible is Internal Market, is IMCO. But of course, the whole impetus, the whole background and context of this is coming from Home Affairs, it's coming from the Justice and Home Affairs area, and the reporting will be back to the Justice and Home Affairs Council. Anyone with an eagle eye will be spotting this. So the rapporteur for the opinion, Mrs. Valero, is taking on more than just an opinion. Really, the politics and the sense of this is coming from us. So it is very important people realise that. You know, although traditionally IMCO have dealt with the nuts and bolts of this proposal. So it's complicated, but anyway, this is our opinion. So I hand the floor to Ms. Valero to explain her approach. Thank you.
Tack så mycket, herr ordförande. Det här är ett väldigt viktigt direktiv som ni för.
Thank you. Well, I think that we're taking a step in the right direction, and I know this has been in the pipeline for some time. As members of Parliament, we've been dealing with this since the beginning of the proposal. We've been inundated with correspondents who obviously want to defend their own areas, and that there is a reason why people feel this way. And I think one of the problems is that it's worded in a rather vague way.
Vilka det är egentligen. Det här är
Yes, you said about, you talked about what kind of arms should not be affected. Yes, I'm over here. I've spoken to hunters' organisations. I've talked about the Civil Defence League in Sweden and the manufacturers, and nobody really knows what kind of weapons we're talking about. If all of them say that it should be accelerated because of the Paris attacks, and if there are no if there's no clear impact assessment yet, if you look at B7, automatic firearms, which are similar to fully automatic weapons. Perhaps we need an explanation exactly what this is meant, but what is not clear is, so that I can answer the people back home when I get a question about this subject, how many weapons and what type of weapons will this affect? It'd be nice if we could have a list. A precise list of exactly what guns will be involved, because I have to know what I'm talking about. And another question that hasn't been covered much is that you can change certain weapons by tampering with them. This happened in the massacre in Sweden, where people can hold a legal weapon, but they change the barrel or they tamper with it to make it into a different type of weapon. So it would be good to hear a little bit about that as well. And there are a lot of owners of weapons who have a license. Would this be retroactive if they have a weapon and it is an automatic weapon that ends up being banned and they have an authorization to hold it? Would they have to give the weapon back? It's important for the guns not to get into the wrong hands. This is what we're talking about after all. So I think basically we need a little bit more background information.
Thank you very much, Ms. Valero. Having made the big speech, I'll put you on the list, Anna. Having made the big speech about it being in our competence, I then didn't take Luigi Soreca from DG Home. It's one of those afternoons. I'm getting a bit tired. I'm sorry. So, Luigi, if I could maybe take you after the members, would that be better, or to go now? Let's just hear out the other members, and then I'll take Luigi to conclude. Would that be better, or do you want to go now? Okay, I'll take the Commission, and then Mr. Halla-aho, if you don't mind, then I'll take you. Okay, Luigi, sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I can be very brief. It's just because of your call on this file to be seen from different perspectives that I took the liberty to want to be intervened, because we have shared fully the management and the preparation of this important legislative initiative with our colleague in DG GROW, exactly to ensure the balance between the internal market objective and the security objective. And I can reassure all of you that there's been no distinction of objective between the different departments of the Commission that have worked both under the political objective, identify the agenda on security, where firearms is trafficking, fight against it is one of the priority. We have looked also very closely when preparing this directive also at various threat assessment prepared not only by Europol but also by specific member states concerning not only member states but also third countries. And that's why in conjunction with the directive we have proposed again together with our colleagues a new action plan on combating illicit trafficking of firearms and explosives within the Union and with third countries. So without, of course, being able to, happy to take all your points on security, I would like also to reassure you that the joint work between the two departments have made sure that the same subject, so the illicit trafficking, has been seen by different perspectives, and many of elements of security are included in this proposal. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm more than assured that you're seeing it from both perspectives and you're working well together. I think my point was that it was an unusual situation where the imperative for the proposal in the first place was coming from terrorist attacks, and so that was the context. And then, of course, the traditional home of these kinds of issues was of course then IMCO. So this is my overall point. But now we're adjusting to this way of working. Okay, so now if we take the next member on the list, is Mr. Halla-aho, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I believe and hope we all agree on the principle that any new restrictions on the rights of our citizens must be proportionate and coherent, and that they should target real problems. Terrorist attacks should not be used as an excuse for measures that have nothing to do with the problem. There are elements in the Commission proposal that raise concern. I will mention some of them. The Commission proposes to ban semi-automatic firearms which resemble automatic firearms. In practice, this would mean certain semi-automatic sporting rifles that are widely used in practical shooting and some other disciplines. The first question is, how can you determine objectively whether there is enough or too much resemblance between one firearm and another? Secondly, even if you can define a firearm which resembles an automatic firearm, what is the point of a ban? These kinds of weapons are very seldom used in any type of crime, and to my knowledge, they have never been used for terrorist purposes in Europe. Also, as you should understand in the Commission, the firepower of a firearm does not depend on what it looks like. The only time a legally possessed semi-automatic rifle has been used by a terrorist in Europe was in Norway in 2011. Mr. Anders Breivik used a Ruger Mini 14 rifle. Ironically, this is one of the very few semi-automatic sporting rifles that do not resemble an assault rifle at all. Thus, it would not be affected by the proposed ban, while almost all other comparable rifles would be. In your proposal, you refer to the high ammunition capacity of these weapons. As you should understand, but obviously don't, high ammunition capacity is a property of a magazine, not of a firearm. If you want to ban high capacity, you should want to ban high-capacity magazines. This, however, would be impractical and pointless because magazines are not registered and they could not be confiscated. The Commission has on many occasions referred to the easy convertibility of semi-automatic firearms into automatic action. Can you name one actual instance where a legally owned semi-automatic sporting rifle has been converted to a machine gun? I don't think you can. The weapons we are talking about are specifically designed so as not to be convertible. Mr. Chair, gun crime in general is rare in EU member states, including those countries with high rates of gun ownership, such as my own country, Finland. 2/3 of the gun crimes are committed with illegal weapons. Of the rest, almost all involve hunting weapons such as shotguns, which would not be affected by this ban. Dear Commission, this part of the proposal is a political and ideological crusade. It is not based on facts. It will not contribute to more security and it will not prevent the next terrorist attack. Terrorists simply do not use these weapons. The Commission also proposes a total ban on fully automatic firearms. These, as a rule, are already prohibited by the existing directive and by national laws. There is a very small number of them in private licensed collections. They have not been used by criminals either. Again, you are barking at the wrong tree. Terrorists and criminals in Europe use illegal military firearms, usually smuggled from former Yugoslavia. This is where your focus should be. The Commission also suggests that all firearm licenses should only be valid for a maximum of 5 years. What is the point? This would increase costs and bureaucracy, but it would bring no added value. Even now, the authorities can and do revoke a license if they have a reason to do so, and this is as it should be. There is much that can be done to make life more difficult for criminals and terrorists, and there is much in the Commission proposal as a whole that we can support. Please do not ruin the proposal and your own credibility with ideas that are disproportionate, incoherent and pointless, and which only affect tens of thousands of law-abiding citizens and businesses. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Karatza-Bilt, please.
Tack talmannen. Kommissionen sa att vi vet naturligtvis att vi ska inte förhindra de...
The Commission has said that they can't prevent private individuals who want to own a weapon if they do so legally, you know, if they're in a sports club or a hunter. So, you know, why make such a proposal? It's not coherent, it's not proportionate, and it's not clearly drafted. Of course we have to combat terrorism. Unfortunately, this is necessary. We've seen we have to use all possible measures in Europe. And maybe directives necessary, but this proposal has got nothing to do with the illegal possession of weapons. It will have the result of provoking a certain sector of European society, people who feel that they will be constrained in their personal liberty and who get the feeling that they are being equated with terrorists, and I don't think that's acceptable. So I think the Commission needs to rethink this. Now, I put a question, a key question to the Commission on the 20th of November 2015. A priority question, and I've received no answer. There are many people in Europe who want to know, for example, why a distinction is being made here between automatic and semi-automatic weapons, or you know, certain semi-automatic weapons. And anyway, I haven't received an answer. What does this actually mean? Because it might mean that many legally held weapons, you know, for sports clubs, for hunting, will be banned. So I do think we need to get clarity as soon as possible on this. This is what the colleague from Finland was saying. I mean, how is it going to combat terrorism if you're not able to take a hunting weapon on a ferry or whatever? It's just going to create more red tape for people who have the right to a private weapon. And then the ban of trading on the internet. Do you really think that ISIS or other terrorists just buy their weapons online? Of course, this is going to hurt somebody who lives in the countryside and doesn't have easy access to a shop or it just hurts ordinary people and doesn't really do anything to combat organized crime or terrorism. Then the Commission says that people should have eye tests or doctor's tests in order to get a license. But in my country, there is no such requirement. You don't have to have a medical certificate or in order to have a weapon. But doctors are supposed to flag up to the police if they think somebody's not suitable to have a weapon. I mean, there are different systems in different EU countries, no doubt, for this sort of thing, but this just wouldn't fit with the Swedish system. because you don't have to prove that you're in good health to have a weapon. I mean, there are good things in the proposal, and I would like to mention those good things. Better exchange of information between member states, another system for the labeling of arms, firearms. The dealers have to be registered. There are all sorts of other requirements, and deactivated arms can't be reactivated again. But I would like to hear more from the Commission about what to do about the illegal arms trade from Libya or the Balkans. Why aren't we getting to grips with that? I think what we're doing here really has very little to do with terrorism.
Thank you, Chair. If you allow me, I will take two roles at this point because I'm representing the S&D Shadow Rapporteur, Sylvia Yvonne Kaufmann, and then I have some remarks and questions of my own. On behalf of the S&D Shadow Rapporteur, I would like to thank the representatives of the Commission for presenting the proposal. Ms. Kaufmann supports the Commission in its efforts to protect European citizens better and hinder the acquisition of weapons by criminals and terrorists. She thinks that the proposal of the Commission goes in the right direction since she believes that it must become more difficult to acquire firearms in the EU, that legally held firearms must be tracked more easily, and that cooperation among the Member States should be strengthened, and on her behalf she is looking forward to a constructive cooperation with both the rapporteur and the other shadow rapporteurs on this important file. From my end, I would like to refer to some remarks that the Commission did. The Commission representative at one point mentions Internet and how easy it is to purchase firearms through the Internet. However, I would like to once again both tell the Commission and also this committee to maybe look a bit more further on the issue of the dark web and technological advances, because when we speak about purchasing firearms over the Internet, a definite differentiation between dark web and normal Internet should be carried out, because ultimately what we would like to see being addressed is the facilitation of black market trade in illegal firearms. That is what I believe we need to attack, and we need to tackle the root causes of exactly these issues if we really want to reach a balance between security and freedoms of our citizens. A second point which the Commission referred to was that the Commission would like to tackle firearms and it does not want, to tackle firearms which are registered and used legally, and at one point the Commission representative said that a balance needs to be struck. However, we have to admit that things as they stand today, they definitely lack clarity. And, for example, the term resemblance was being coined and mentioned. However, there is no legal definition of what we are referring to when we are speaking about resemblance. And the same thing vis-à-vis replicas. And here I would like to mention a point, because this vagueness and lack of clarity is resulting in concerns among citizens which are being fuelled and brought forward. For example, if we have to speak about the prohibition of replicas, are we meaning and understanding that, for example, reproduction of historical military weapons for the purposes of reenactment would be banned? Because in that case, we'll be limiting a particular sector significantly. And the same would apply for the sports sector, where you have certain legal firearms which are used precisely in that area. And secondly, the activation of cultural and historical weapons. What do we mean exactly? Because something like deactivating firearms in museums or also historical weapons would significantly decrease the values of such weaponry, and would also mean that you have historians and experts that will not be able to continue their research and development. So I would like the Commission to bring us a bit more clarity on this point, because as things stand today, I have my doubts how the regulation as is will really address the illegal trafficking of firearms. And I would like the Commission to explain further on this and how it intends to actually address the issue of illegal trafficking of firearms. Thank you.
Mr. Dupré, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to tell you a story. A few years ago in Belgium, there was a crazy guy who'd bought a gun somewhere, killed a young woman, a black woman who was looking after some children in a park in Antwerp. So following that tragic event, there was a strong reaction in in Belgium, which was that we should monitor possession of weapons. People had the obligation to declare them. If you had a collector's item, you had to give them up. There were controls, and now if you want to have a gun in Belgium, you have to go through 13 or 15 different stages. You've got to get your local governor's approval. You're the public prosecutor. You've got to go to the police to get a certificate of, good conduct. But of course, this was a lot of red tape for the citizen. However, the terrorists from Molenbeek who went to Paris didn't, go through this procedure. So, this is the annoying thing about the current system. This debate on regulating traffic in weapons, it sort of suggests that you can combat terrorism this way, but surely, if you really, who do you take us for? Who do you take us for? I think the first thing, I think, is just to withdraw this proposal from the category of fight against terrorism, because that's an imposture. The terrorism circuit uses other sources of weapons. Let's not insult the public's intelligence. And it also means that young people who are using weapons in an honourable manner for sport, leisure purposes, after having gone through all the hurdles, it's just unfair to them. It's not their fault that we haven't managed to dismantle the circuits that the terrorists use. So I think this is a bad file. It should be taken out of this context of combating terrorism. Anyway, about the proposal, some definitions have to be clarified. A weapon that looks like, should be banned. Well, how do you define that looks like a real one? Are you going to publish photos? You can't use this in a legal text. You have to define objective and serious criteria that nobody can dispute. The only point I want to stress now is this. I have a more serious problem with the internet. I think there we need to reflect seriously on this. In my country, there are some medicines that you can only buy from a chemist shop or from a pharmacy. You can't get them from any other source. And I think for weapons, we need to rethink things. In the current state of affairs, including for reasons of the current context and for reasons of the content of this proposal, I think it's really come at the wrong time and is not appropriately drafted.
Thank you. Mrs. Holmeyer, please.
Vielen herzlichen Dank, Herr Vorsitzender.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I agree with Gerard. Clearly, the problems of Molenbeek are completely disassociated from the question of availability of weapons on the market for hunters. You might have a hunter that might want a pistol to put an animal out of its misery after a sort of a bad hit, a hunting accident. That's got nothing to do with terrorism, clearly. And I've never heard that these weapons appear regularly in illegal circuits or disappear suddenly from sort of legal circulation. I don't see there's any evidence of that. Clearly, the Commission proposal does include important points about the destruction of weapons. For example, if you're talking about a Kalashnikov, you don't just take out a couple of parts, but you destroy it so that it can never be reused. I think that's a very positive thing. But to say to any hunter who has one or more weapons that they have to go through a really complex procedure every 5 years, I think doesn't really make too much sense. It would make sense to have some sort of police document or license, maybe a place to note down if somebody has come to the attention of the police in any suspicious way who happens to hold a gun, or certainly useful to know if anyone suffers from some severe mental illness or something like that. You know, then that's sensible. But carrying out a simple psychological examination, I don't think that's really going to help identify problems, and it certainly won't help in combating terrorism. So there, I completely agree with a colleague from S&D who says that we have to look at the dark net. We need to ask ourselves why various types of weapons are available on the internet. You know, everything from machine guns to rocket launchers to repeating rifles to calibers that are not only deadly but highly destructive. This is the sort of thing we want to know and that we want to address. I have to say to the Commission as regards the draft, I think the paragraphs on the certificates or licenses are not very clear. We've had this sort of system in the past in Germany. We tried the system for years in Germany, and then after years of trial, we gave it up because we found the system was not implementable and not enforceable for the police, and also that these measures never prevented any crimes from being committed. So paragraphs of this nature were actually removed from the German statute book. So perhaps the experience that member states have had with gun controls should be taken into account, whether it's the Belgian experience, the German experience. I think you need to work out what are the key elements that are necessary in the fight against illegal weapons trading. But please don't just make life impossible for sports clubs, hunters clubs, because, you know, while they go to the barricades, you know, terrorists will be gaily buying their weapons on the darknet still. And of course, I think it makes sense to only buy from certified sources. You know, there are some perfectly sensible ideas in the proposal, but don't include things that we have already tried and that haven't worked, and that have just imposed enormous amounts of frustration and red tape on people without stopping any terrorists in their tracks. I think you should refrain from repeating mistakes of the past, because that would just add grist to the mill to all the people who see Europe as a source of monstrous bureaucracy. And I don't think we should annoy people unnecessarily with red tape. It doesn't help.
Sorry, colleagues, just slight administrative problem here. My notes have just run out, you know, very robotic I am, so that's me, really. This has been a really excellent debate, and that's why I'm not really cutting anyone short, because it's an exchange of views, but it's been really of the highest quality, so I don't want to cut people short. We still have 1, 2... I know 3 speakers, and the eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed that we have to finish at 5 o'clock. It's 5, isn't it? Is the end of the meeting 5?
5:30, we have the room till 5:30.
I know we have the room until 5:30. We have the room for centuries, probably, but I'm just wondering about the interpreters and everyone else. Yeah, exactly. What about the interpreters and everything? 5:30. Okay. Okay, colleagues, can you do maybe just like 1 minute each? Start with Mrs. Winberg, sorry to cut you short, but maybe if you could try 1 minute, that would be great. Thank you.
Tack, herr ordförande. Jag ska hålla mig kort, för jag tycker mycket har sagts här.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, I will be brief. A lot has been said already. The proposal is going quite far. And it's the huntsman and a sportsman who are going to suffer. We have also heard what has been said about how people get hold of weapons. We know what happened in Molenbeek. How weapons were moved around. Is there anything we can do to prevent it? We know that terrorists, if they want to get a weapon, they will. There was a survey done in the south of Sweden by a newspaper illustrating how fast you can get a gun. How long did it take? Half an hour. In fact, less. It's pretty straightforward. So legal weapons are not the problem. So perhaps we should address things from a different point of view.
Thank you for your brevity as well. Next is Anna Gomez. Anna, please.
My question to the Commission is the Commission foresees a system where Member States have to notify the Commission and account for the stolen weapons which are legally possessed, namely from the armed forces, the security forces. Because I think these are a very significant part of many of these illegally possessed weapons who can be diverted into terrorist purposes. And is there an accountability of what the incidents and indeed I think there is a relationship with the lax way in which Member States have been implementing the common position on arms exports. And that would be indeed a very important way to actually make Member States control the illegal trafficking of weapons and its use inside European countries.
Thank you, Anna. And Juan Fernando, please.
Thank you, Chair. Because, of course, just like many of us, I think we have an expressed feeling of being puzzled by this whole issue. All of a sudden, we have been caught by surprise by this Commission's initiative that there is a problem with the regulation of holding and the possession of arms within the European Union. And many of us, I think, are more familiar with the situation of gun trafficking and arms possession in the United States than we are in Europe. Many of us do not have an accurate idea of how is it like to buy weapons in a kind of black market in the net. Many of us do not have an accurate idea of how easy it is to get a heavy weapon in the black market in the net. And I think it is about time that, be it through the Commission or be it through a policy paper here in the Libe Committee, we have an accurate picture of how is the situation of arms possession, legal arms possession in every member state of the European Union, and how is it the situation of illegal arms trafficking within the European Union, so that we can have an accurate assessment of how is it going to be the validity, the efficacy and the viability of the Commission's initiative. I think many of the doubts and many of the thoughts and the concerns that have been aroused through the discussion express this impression that we are somehow playing by heart, maybe out of tune, maybe without the accurate information that is needed in order to assess properly the Commission's initiative. That is my point.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, on this point, I'm very happy that this was only a first exchange of views, but actually this conversation has been repeated in many national delegations. It's a very live issue that many external constituents have been corresponding with people. So I'm very aware of this, and I think I'm very happy that on this first exchange of views, there's been a very... there's no time for the Commission now. That's my point I'm going to make, that there's been a very strong and intelligent response, and I think our rapporteur, who's got a very difficult job on this file, has heard that. So unfortunately, we don't have time now for a long reply by the Commission because we're being defeated by time, and Mrs. Gabriel has been waiting patiently for her point, and we all want to go home as well. So I just want to say to those who have taken the time to make these contributions, we're not going to take the Commission now, but we will have a decent slot for this point in the next available agenda, at the beginning of an agenda. So I say that to the Commission as well, because it's a very complex point between two DGs and a very, very important point for the members. And I do thank members for their very intelligent and articulate presentations on this. And I'm sorry it was caught by time and also at the end of the day's agenda, but thank you again for the way that was presented. And we do now have to go to the final point so we can wrap up the agenda. Thank you again, and thanks to the Commission, to both DGs for their